Welcome to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Join us every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio for a look at the life, deeds, and words of Yeshua Messiah and his followers from the Torah-centric Hebraic perspective they were originally lived and written in.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your souls. You'll find rest for your souls. Oh, you'll find rest for your souls when you walk in his way.
Today's program is on Matthew chapter 23. Why is it that Messiah called the Pharisees and scribes blind guides, and then, in verse 3 of Matthew chapter 23, appears to be saying to observe whatever they say? Is there a contradiction in the scriptures? What is the difference between those with real spiritual authority and people like these religious leaders whom Messiah condemned? Did Messiah condemn these religious leaders simply because they didn't accept him as the Messiah? Is Matthew chapter 23 anti-Semitic? Was Messiah promoting anti-Semitism when he condemned the scribes and the Pharisees, or was he merely condemning the specific sins of specific people in a specific generation? Were these leaders really what Messiah said they were? Or is it all just some big misapprehension that these religious leaders were corrupt? What about the hypocrites and corruption of today? Should we isolate ourselves from even the true believers because of all the hypocritical people who act like these religious leaders? Why or why not? And how do we keep our own selves from behaving like the hypocrites? Stay tuned through to the end of this program for insight from Eliyahu ben David on these questions and more in Matthew chapter 23. And now, here's today's first scripture portion. Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 through verse 15. Then Yeshua spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sat on Moses' seat. All things, therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, observe and do. But don't do their works, for they say and don't do. For they bind heavy burdens that are grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders. But they themselves will not lift a finger to help them. But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their tefillin broad, enlarge the fringe of their garments, and love the place of honor at feasts, the best seats in the synagogues, the salutations in the marketplaces, and to be called Rabbi, Rabbi, by men. But don't you be called Rabbi, for one is your Rabbi, the Messiah, and all of you are brothers. Call no man on the earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Neither be called masters, for one is your Master, the Messiah. But he who is greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses, and as a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For you don't enter in yourselves, neither do you allow those who are entering in to enter. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel around by sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of Gehenna as yourselves. And now here's Eliyahu ben David with insight on that portion.
Stand at the crossroads
Greetings, friends. We're moving into Matthew chapter 23 now, where we find YESHUA confronting the religious leaders of his day. We're looking at this theme tonight, indictment. They sat on Moses' seat. What does that mean? And why were they indicted by Messiah? There are those people who have real spiritual authority delegated from Yahweh. And then on the other hand, we have these folks that abuse their religious authority. And we need this instruction from the scriptures to be able to tell the difference, and certainly not to become one of those whom YESHUA had condemned. You know, the first thing I'd like to point out here is this picture of Moses' seat that was discovered in 1926 at the ruins of the synagogue at Chorazin. It's called the Seat of Moses. And apparently all or most of the synagogues of that time had a seat like this that was the seat of Moses, where the leader would sit and he would instruct that local synagogue assembly. And I think it's just kind of interesting and, you know, quite substantial, being carved out of a basalt block. Certainly, it shows the reality of what we read in the scriptures. You know, we have all these little details, and then they dig something up like this, the seat of Moses, and it almost brings you right there back to the first century, and you can almost see this happen. You can almost see this religious leader sitting in this seat, assuming all this authority, the authority of Moses, while at the same time teaching all these traditions of men. Very, very powerful thing. Well, this is what YESHUA said. The scribes and Pharisees sat on Moses' seat. And according to most versions, he then says, all things, therefore, whatsoever they tell you to observe and do. Really? Would he really tell us that we should observe and do all the things that the Pharisees say to do? Well, the reason this is a problem is because of all the things Messiah already said about this. For instance, what about this? Messiah said of these same leaders, you have made the commandment of Elohim void because of your tradition. So are we to follow void traditions? Doing what they tell us? Or what about this? Messiah said of these same leaders, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And then the disciples discerned what he meant, the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So how can we beware their teaching but observe everything they say? Isn't that a contradiction? And even this, Matthew 15, Messiah points out that they are blind guides. And they are guides of the blind. If the blind guide the blind, both will fall into a pit. So are we going to follow them into a pit? Well, Messiah says, leave them alone. Isn't that exactly the opposite from saying, do everything they tell you? So, obviously, there's some kind of a problem here, because we have multiple witnesses here of Messiah saying, don't do what they say. And then we have this one verse where it's saying, observe what they say. So, there appears to be a mistake in the translation of the verse. Now, does this mean there's a mistake in the Bible? No. It means there was a mistake in the mind of the person that translated the Bible from the original language. They didn't understand it completely, so they mistranslated it. And you know what? That's why we have lots of different resources that we dig in more deeply. And I wish I could tell you there's a certain translation and everything in it is perfect. But there is no such translation as that. You have to dig into the text whenever you find something like this that just isn't agreeing with the whole flow of what the scriptures are saying. In this particular case, we note that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew, and it was later translated into Greek. So in the Greek, it's not expressed exactly the same way as it would have been originally in the Hebrew. And that's perfectly normal because you can't have a one-to-one correspondence from one language to another. That's what translation is really all about. And by the way, the original Hebrew Matthew was burned by the Catholic Church. And maybe they've got a copy down there in the basement at the Vatican, but if they do, we're not seeing it. However, a Hebrew Matthew has been found. Now, we don't know if it's a complete representation of the original Hebrew Matthew. This is the Hebrew Matthew first offered by George Howard of the University of Georgia in 1987 under the title The Gospel of Matthew According to a Primitive Hebrew Text, published by Mercer University Press. Now, when this first came out back in 1987, this was quite a while ago, I got really excited about this Hebrew Matthew, and I bought one immediately. And when I read it, you know, it translates the Hebrew into English. I found the Tetragrammaton, the actual name of Yahweh, in Matthew. And you know, in the Greek Matthew, that's not there. So I wrote to George Howard, who translated this, because I wanted to know. I said, you know, did you put that back in there, or was that there in the text? And he wrote to me and he told me, yes, that was in the text, and that's why he put it into the English. So I was very excited about that. Well, this particular Matthew that George Howard published in Hebrew was from a man named Shem Taub ben Isaac. And this was part of a bigger work called Even Bohan. And this bigger work was refuting the New Testament. And so it included all of the New Testament Matthew. But what was unusual about it is this was not the same as the Greek Matthew. It was unique in many aspects. For example, having the divine name in it. So it was very interesting to compare. Another thing about this Hebrew Matthew is it had a lot of Hebrew idioms and sayings and things like that in their original form. And this kind of gives additional understanding as you read the Greek translation of the Hebrew Matthew. It's all very interesting for people who like to dig into these kinds of things like me. Well, here's what it says in that Hebrew Matthew in Matthew 23, 2 and 3. Upon the seat of Moses, the Pharisees and sages sit. And now, all which he, it says he, will say unto you, keep and do. But their ordinances, that is the Pharisees, and deeds do not do, because they say and do not do. So in this Hebrew Matthew, it's very clear by having he there in the verse that it's referring to Moses. See, they were sitting in Moses' seat, right? So what Messiah is saying is, hey, you should do what Moses says, but don't do what these guys do. Don't do what they tell you. That's what he's saying. They're not Moses, in other words, right? That's what he's saying. Okay. Well, here's the New American Standard Version with the strong numbers of these same verses. And you notice in verse 3, it doesn't actually have a word for the word they. That has to be assumed as to who is being spoken to. Observe, and they have the word they there, whereas the Hebrew Matthew has he there. Huge difference. So I think we can easily see they just plain got that wrong. It should be he instead of they. But I think we have to forgive them because they're not Torah keepers. As a matter of fact, pretty much all of the Christian Bibles are not translated by people who are Torah keepers. So how are they going to tell you to do what Moses says? Right? You got to watch out for that because people's beliefs sometimes become involved in the way they translate the scriptures. However, YESHUA did tell us to observe and do what Moses said. So this is what we strive to do. Here is the word, here translated as tell. This is the Greek word, and it's a primary verb properly to lay forth, relate in words, usually of a systematic or set discourse. Isn't that the Torah? It's set forth in a systematic way, the Torah. So even when you see that word, you can see it's really talking about Moses, not about the Pharisees. YESHUA is saying to observe what Moses said in a systematic way, in other words, in the Torah. Well, now that we've got that part of it settled, let's just talk about Moses' seat. It's really about spiritual authority, isn't it? It's about people assuming spiritual authority. And why do they do that? Well, there are those who are delegated with real spiritual authority. And these people are people who have the mind of YESHUA Messiah, who follow him. So they're striving to be like him. And if you know who he is, then it shouldn't be hard for you to know who they are when you meet them. But what about the other people, the people like these scribes and Pharisees? What are they really in it for? Well, he told them, right? They liked being somebody. They liked people looking up to them. They liked thinking that they were important and better than other people. And they liked to profit from their position. And that really hasn't changed. The Pharisees had not cornered the market on that. The seat of Moses is like a toll booth. You pay the toll so you can get into the favor of God. And the Pharisee is the guy in the toll booth collecting the tolls. It's as simple as that. That's what it's really all about. And you know, this is the difference between religion, isn't it? And a real relationship with Messiah. And we could become cynical about this and think, well, I don't really need people. I don't really need to be a part of an assembly of believers because they're all evil like this, and they're all greedy, and they're all taking advantage of everybody. And I can't say you're completely wrong there, because we've had a lot of experience like that. And this sort of thing continues. However, the problem you're going to have if you take that approach is that you will never do the will of God. That's simple. Because the will of God is that we're a part of his family. Right? All sons and daughters of the living God. And you see, to be part of a family, you're part of other people, aren't you? His plan for his family is wonderful. And it involves all of us together, being brothers and sisters together. So, yeah, there's a lot of bad things that have happened in the name of religion. There's been a lot of people who are swindlers and evil people involved in religion. Absolutely true. But don't let that turn you away from the real people of Yeshua Messiah. And realize he's doing a work today. He's raising up a remnant of people who really love him, a remnant of people who belong to Yeshua Messiah and are striving in sincerity and truth to be like him. And no, we're not perfect. We have a long way to go. And that's the truth. And, we've got a lot that we're having to deal with. There's baggage from the past, and a lot of it has to do with religion, doesn't it? That makes this whole thing difficult. But he's there for us. And we are going to get there. And we're not going to do it by being like the Pharisees, pretending we're something we're not. What we are going to do is be honest, be humble, and to keep striving, trusting in Yahweh, looking to him to help us to be more and more like his Son every day.
Some of the verses Eliyahu referenced can be found in Matthew chapter 15, verse 4 and verse 6, and Matthew chapter 16, verse 11 through 12. More information on the original Hebrew Matthew can be found in Eliyahu's On the Road to Zion program entitled Number 71, Apostle James the Just. You can also learn more about Messiah in Bible prophecy in other On the Road to Zion programs. The On the Road to Zion program archive can be found at Tsiyon.net. That's Tsiyon.net. These On the Road to Zion programs also air from time to time on Zion Road. Check the schedule on the Zion Road website to see what's playing. That's Tsiyon.org. Don't go away. Hebraic Insights in the Gospels will be right back after this.
The restoration of the remnant of Israel is one of the most undertaught, neglected, and unknown major events in Bible prophecy.
A strange fact, since prophecies and references to this event can be found all throughout almost every major book of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation.
Now, Yahweh has raised up Zion Ministry to teach his remnant nation of Israel everything they need to know about this often neglected truth in his perfect timing.
To learn who the remnant of Israel is, what the Zion mission is, and why we teach the things we do, go to our website at Tsiyon.org and click the Remnant Vision in the menu bar.
That is Tsiyon.org.
Zion Road, the only way home.
And I will give you peace. Sound the trumpet, a call to repentance. He will remember our sins no more. YESHUA has come to redeem us. We will return to Yah and sing for joy. Return to me, my people, and I will restore you. Return to me, my people, and I will give you peace. Return to me, my people, and I will restore you. Return to me, my people, and I will give you peace. Sound the trumpet, a call to repentance. He will remember our sins no more. YESHUA has come to redeem us. We will return to Yah and sing for joy. Return to me, my people, and I will restore you. Return to me, my people, and I will give you peace. Return to me, my people, and I will restore you. Return to me, my people, and I will give you peace. Sound the trumpet, a call to repentance. He will remember our sins no more. YESHUA has come to redeem us. We will return to Yah and sing for joy. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it. And you'll find rest for your souls. You'll find rest for your souls. Oh, you'll find rest for your souls when you walk in His way.
Welcome back. Here's the next scripture portion. Matthew chapter 23, verse 16 through verse 39. Woe to you, you blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing, But whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obligated. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? Whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he is obligated? You blind fools, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? He therefore who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. He who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who was living in it. He who swears by heaven swears by the throne of Elohim and by him who sits on it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have left undone the weightier matters of the Torah, justice, mercy, and faith. But you ought to have done these, and not to have left the other undone. You blind guides, who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and unrighteousness. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the platter, that its outside may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitened tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but inwardly are full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the tombs of the righteous, and say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we wouldn't have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Therefore, you testify to yourselves that you are children of those who killed the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you offspring of vipers, how will you escape the judgment of Gehenna? Therefore, behold, I send to you prophets, wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues, and persecute from city to city, that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you killed between the sanctuary and the altar. Most certainly I tell you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I would have gathered your children together, even as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me from now on until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. And now, here's Eliyahu ben David on that portion.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it.
Shabbat Shalom, friends. Great to have you with us once again. Moving through the book of Matthew, and we're getting into a really amazing part of Matthew. We've started in Matthew 23, and these are the events that occurred shortly before Messiah's death and resurrection. And part of the last order of events to happen was his judgment upon the religious leaders of his day and upon that apostate system. So the things we're talking about are kind of serious, but wow, they just so overlap how things are in the time that we're living in today. Our theme here is condemned, desolate house. And as we go along, we'll be developing this theme. But of course, this is about the temple, which was supposed to be the one place in the earth that represented the name of the Father. And yet it had become, well, as Messiah said, a den of thieves. And that could not be allowed to stand. So we're going to see exactly what Messiah had to say to the leaders of that generation and what happened. It's very profound what Messiah said to those Pharisees. And what I think is interesting is that here, 2,000 years later, the religious descendants of the Pharisees are still trying to get out from under this judgment. Now, in saying that, some people would say to me, well, you're anti-Semitic. And I would have to tell them, no, I'm not, because what this was about is really sort of an internal problem for Israel. And YESHUA was the Messiah of Israel, right? He had authority. He was the king. And he was a Jew. And he was right. And the Pharisees, I'm sure there were some exceptions who were trying to do the right thing, but on the whole, it was a corrupt system. And you know, we see this repeated over and over again through history, right? We see people come into power, whether it's in religious organizations, whether it's in politics, whatever, business. And it seems that there's a certain element that ends up taking over and becoming sort of an elite and feeding off of that system and off of the people. And it's not just these Pharisees. It happens over and over again. Look around in the world, and you have to agree with me. It's just how it is. But the difference with the Pharisees is they were claiming to represent the one true God. And so that put them in even a more dangerous position than these other systems of men that do the same thing. Because when you are connected with the name of the one true God, that's a very serious thing. And people are watching. And how you represent him really matters. So it's not anti-Semitic to look at the truth of history, look at the message, and see, did it happen? Did it not happen? Was it the truth? Was it not the truth? Well, PJ Media had an article entitled, Who Were the Pharisees? And the article was to correct misapprehensions from the Christian Bible. Now, there's a whole lot of things about that I don't agree with. Obviously, I don't think there's any misapprehensions. I think what there is a narrative reporting the truth. And I don't think it's the Christian Bible, by the way. I think that is how some people want to look at it. They want to make it sectarian. But it's not sectarian. It's part of all the scriptures that were inspired for our good. It's the New Covenant scriptures. And as a matter of fact, when those scriptures were written, there was no such thing as Christianity. As I've pointed out and proven from history, Christianity did not start until the 2nd century. These are the Messianic scriptures, friends, not the Christian scriptures. But nevertheless, getting back to what's happening in this article, it's a matter of trying to get out from under these so-called misapprehensions. Somehow these things that Messiah said aren't true. And the Pharisees, who are the spiritual fathers of modern-day Judaism, were really good people. And what's in the scriptures about them, why, that's somehow a mistake. So what about that? Are these things we're reading in Matthew 23 misapprehensions? Messiah was mistaken about these people and they're really wonderful folks? Or are the things we're reading the facts of history about who those people really were? Well, this was in fact a judgment of Messiah. It wasn't just him expressing an opinion. It was him actually making a judgment and telling them what that judgment was. And he found them guilty of corruption. I don't know about you, but I myself am sick of corruption. I see way too much of it going on in this world and not being corrected. And for me, that makes me sick. And so I'm cheering when I am reading Messiah calling these people out because of their corruption. He said, even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that in the news media. I'm seeing that in the world of politics. And I'm seeing that in the world of religion. People representing themselves as one thing, but actually doing quite the opposite over and over and over again. And that was not okay for the people who had this position of leadership in the worship of the one true God. He also found them guilty even of murder. I have no doubt that this was true. You know, if you read Flavius Josephus, for example, who was a Jewish priest, a historian who lived at the time of the first century, you read his account of what happened back then, and it is absolutely full of intrigue and even murder. So I have no doubt that this is true. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How many have we read about? The Apostle James, who was beheaded by this system. How about Stephen, who was judged by these very same people and unjustly and contrary to the law was stoned to death by this system? How about Yeshua's brother, James, who was likewise killed in such a horrid manner? All of them simply because they were speaking the truth about Yeshua Messiah. They were indeed prophets. They were wise men. They were scribes, murdered by these leaders. And perhaps the greatest sin of all, this Pharisaic regime rejected their Messiah. All the prophecies are there. These men claim to be doctors of the scriptures, and yet they wouldn't admit to what was right before their face because they didn't want to turn over their authority and the golden goose that they had created to receive their Messiah. And just think about the sin that was against that whole country. Just imagine if the religious leaders had done the right thing and had received their Messiah and had led the rest of the people in receiving him. What a different picture there would have been. Your whole New Covenant scriptures would be entirely different, right? But they didn't let that happen. They did everything they could to stop it, even to the point of murder. So, because of these things, Messiah pronounced judgment on that generation. Now, realize this was not on every generation of Israelites. He said, on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth. Most certainly, I tell you, all these things will come upon this generation. The people who were doing the wicked things were the people who were going to experience the destruction. Isn't that what's righteous? And that's what he said would happen, that it would happen to that generation. So he gave the verdict, basically said, I'm leaving now. You had your chance, but realize your temple is empty. The whole thing that you're going through there, all the sacrifices, all that, it's for nothing because your temple is desolate, which means waste, empty. God was not there. And soon Messiah wouldn't be there either. So it had the name of being the temple of Yahweh, but in reality, it was a heap of trash about to be disposed of because of the people that were running it. That's what desolate is all about. An empty temple fit only for destruction. So what does history say about all this? Well, I mentioned Flavius Josephus, and he was there through the destruction of that temple. He was an eyewitness of all of these events, and he was a priest. So he was intimately aware of what went on in the temple service and within that whole system. He wrote this, I cannot but think that it was because God had doomed this city to destruction as a polluted city and was resolved to purge his sanctuary by fire. Sounds to me like Flavius Josephus, the Jewish priest, agreed with Messiah about the condition of that temple and the system that ran it. He had more to say, too, that I think is interesting. He said of Jerusalem, O most wretched city, what misery so great as this didst thou suffer from the Romans when they came to purify thee from thy internal pollutions? For thou couldst be no longer a place fit for God. That sounds a lot like Matthew 23 to me. That's the reality. So we have history. We have what Messiah said. We have a second witness that is not even a believer in Messiah, but an eyewitness to those events, who is really part of that system, agreeing with Messiah about the reason for what happened to Jerusalem and to the temple. There's no misapprehensions here about that system, no matter how hard some may try to exonerate the people that brought on all of this misery. So, just think about what happened here, because it tells you a lot. You know, we will go into a lot more about this. We have in the past. But all of this came about as a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. It came about just when it was supposed to happen. Messiah came just when he was supposed to come. His judgment was true. And what he said about that generation came upon that generation. Is that not the stamp of truth? Is that not enough to prove to us that these events that happened are not just meaningless events of history, but they were in fact fulfilling his words, his judgment. And friends, if that's not true, then what could be true, right? We have him telling all of this in advance. And in our next couple of meetings, we're going to be talking about Matthew 24. There's even more about all this. And he knew all of this in advance, told us it all happened just like he said. That means that his judgment was right. There are no misapprehensions here. But it also means something else, and that is that everything that he said about our generation is also true. The judgment that has already been rendered regarding the corrupt system of this world will take place. The sentence has already been given, and it will be carried out. It calls upon us to be aware of the times in which we live and to walk circumspectly with our Messiah as these important events unfold. But realize this is really our time to shine. It's our time to make a stand for Messiah, even in the midst of a horrible darkness in this world.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find a rest for your souls. You'll find a rest for your souls. Oh, you'll find a rest for your souls when you walk in his ways.
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Further teachings and study materials on various related topics and others can be found at our membership site, Tsiyon Tabernacle. Even free members of Tsiyon.net can learn about the history of the Christian and Jewish schisms, the remnant of Israel, and God's plan for the remnant in these last days by signing up at the website and joining us for Tsiyon Fast Track. The deceptions of numerous leaders in Christian, Jewish, social, and political spheres throughout the generations since Messiah's coming mean we as modern-day believers have a lot of catching up to do. Not only do we need to catch up, but in order to meet with the times ahead, we need to get ahead of the enemy and take back more ground than we've ever taken. This is the generation where we need to win the war and not just the battle. Fortunately, Yahweh is working in the lives of his people and in Tsiyon ministry to prepare his remnant of Israel for the days ahead. The battle belongs to Yahweh, but he grants the victory to his servants. Being his people and keeping the covenant is going to be more than following just the commands written in his holy book. We also have to learn to follow his commands to us today, in this generation, in order to avoid the great deception coming on the earth. But how can we do that if we don't even know the current battle plan, or the proper order of our ranks? How can we inquire of Yahweh to know where we fit in, individually, to his remnant nation, and what our role is in his nation, if we don't know what his plan is going to be? There's a lot to learn and a long way to go, but Tsiyon Fast Track will give you the big picture overview of what Tsiyon ministry is all about in as little as 1 year. This preparation is vital, and Tsiyon.net is the best place we have to ensure that it'll be available to whoever wants to see it. So please don't miss it. Sign up at Tsiyon.net and check out Tsiyon Fast Track today. Sign up is free. Just go to Tsiyon.net. That's TSIYON.net. Or click the membership link on the Tsiyon Road website. New programs on the Gospels will be airing every Sabbath on Zion Road Radio. Join us next Shabbat to learn more in the book of Matthew. Shabbat Shalom!
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your soul. You'll find rest for your soul. Oh, you'll find rest for your soul when you walk in His ways. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths.
Would you like to hear more of Eliyahu's teachings? Do you have a question or prayer request and would like to get in touch with one of our volunteers for help? Or do you just want to know more about Eliyahu ben David and Zion Ministry? Visit our website at Tsiyon.org, where you can listen to more teachings from Eliyahu ben David straight from the homepage of our website. Check out our books, DVDs, internet videos, and other social media outlets. Learn more about Eliyahu and the Zion team on the About page. See what our ministry's mission is on the Remnant Vision page. Send a question or prayer request from our Contact Us page. Or click Join Us in the menu bar to learn about our community site, Zion Tabernacle. To find out more about Zion Ministry, go to Tsiyon.org. That's Tsiyon.org, spelled TSIYON.org.
Judgment came, the gavel fell, the righteous waned, and I was stranded. They banished me, the bars came down, the wicked reigned, and I was stranded. But Yahweh turned and heard my voice as it be spoken. Oh, He lifted me from the depths of the ocean and set my feet on solid ground, restored my soul from downward motion, and the whole